Welcome everyone and welcome to this week's F3 Fixed Track Guide. We are at Canadian Tire Motorsport and what a pesky little track this thing is. Lap times are just over a minute long, around about minute 10, minute 11, and God, there's hardly any braking points around this track. You use very little brake, very quick, and it's going to make for some very, very interesting racing. Not been round here before in F3, have done in GT3, and that was bad at the best of times. Obviously, the main corner to be aware of here is a big uphill kink right-hander, where I'm going to assume a lot of crashes are going to be had. So yeah, lots to pay attention to here, guys. The fixed setup this week is okay. It could be better. iRacing, I don't think have quite made it 5 for 5. There's not a lot of front end. I've tried the open setups, PDS and Craig's, and they're very good. They've got a nice amount of downforce and the front of the car really turns in nicely. With the fixed setup, the only time it really starts to properly turn in is when you've got very, very little fuel in the car and the track temperatures are really low. So yeah, it's something definitely to be aware of this week when switching between the open and the fixed setup. Now, as always, I set the track conditions as per iRacing's time and date, and it just generates them randomly. So it threw out track temperature of 24 degrees with an air temperature of 23, and we managed to set a time of 1 minute 10.7. Maybe a little bit of time could be gained here and there, but as I said, with how little front end this car has, it's very difficult to try and consistently get those laps together. So yeah, something definitely to be aware of here this week, guys, in the fixed setup. But yeah, lo and behold, let's head into it. As always, we are going to see the lap from the cockpit view, then a far chase camera angle, and then we're going to analyse that lap. So yeah, lo and behold, remember to hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and let's head into it. So guys, that was the hot lap from cockpit and far chase camera angle. Time for us to analyse it, but just before we do, let's talk about my brake bias. As always, I do always change it because the standard fixed setup is just too far forward, 55.5. Very rarely do we need that brake bias that far forward. Personal preference for me at most tracks is around the 54 range or between the 54 and 55 range. And this week we actually aren't within that range because it's a very peculiar track where we don't need a lot of braking, or there isn't a lot of braking that's required. The double right-hander, the very difficult kind of kink corner, we don't need a lot of brake pressure. We're trying to finesse it round the corner, so I've actually dropped my brake bias back towards 52.1. Now, as always, that is personal preference, but you can use that as a base and go from there. I think some of the open setups I tried this week, PDS and Craig's, they're around 50 to 51, so they've really dropped their brake bias back. Personally, that was a little bit too far back. 52 was good for me, but as always, guys, please test it out for yourselves, see what works for you, see where you lock the tyres up, and go from there. But yeah, let's now analyse that lap. So we're on a start-finish straight, and it's a very short start-finish straight, but the first corner is an overtaking opportunity here. If you now the exit from the last corner, which of course we will get to. Now we're going to run this down, and we are going to pause it just here because the first right-hander is very quick. It's flat out. As always, guys, as I repeat in every single track guide every single week, if you've got a full tank of fuel, cold tyres, i.e. pretty much the first 2 to 3 laps of the race, the car reacts very differently. Particularly with this setup, as I said before, there's not a lot of front ends, so the car doesn't turn in as well as the open setups this week. So we do need to take that into consideration. You may have to shift down a gear to allow the car to turn in, to get the front end of the car turning in, or a little bit more brake than you would in this lap that you've just seen. As always, I'm running about half a tank of fuel because I've run a few laps beforehand and the tyres are up to temperature, because there's no way, Jose, that you would be able to do the time that I've set at 10.7 or even get into the 1 minute 10 range with just after coming out of the pits. It's just not possible unless you're running hacks. But yeah, let's get back to the analysis here. So first corner, what we keep an eye out for is the crest. It's pretty much a blind corner, a blind turning point. We can't see the actual apex, so we need to judge it, and we're keeping our foot down. And what we're keeping an eye out for, if we just move it on a little bit more, is this tyre wall here in the distance. Now, once this comes into view, that's when you can start turning in. You can see I'm steering straight, and then just as it comes in a couple of frames later, that's when I then start to turn in. For a reference point of if you've turned in too late, you can see this dirt patch on the left hand side. If you start turning in once you hit that dirt patch, you've turned in too late, because you're not going to hit the apex with full throttle. You will run wide. So we're going to just move it on here, full throttle all the way. And as you can see, we've got the apex coming into view. You can see the line indicating the edge of the track. And what we want to do here is get the tyres on the red and white curb, or the first half of the red and white curb, the left hand side, because if you do run this car over the middle, you will bottom out and you will lose a bit of time. So just be careful of that, guys. You can see here as we just move it on, the car bobbles a little bit. So maybe I got on the curb a little bit too much there, but still kind of carried enough speed through. You can see, especially at the end there, it really kind of drops down. So just be careful of getting your car too far over, because you will lose speed. So very simple first corner, allowing the car to drift over to the left. As we said, if you've got a full tank of fuel, cold tyres, you may have to, well, you will have to lift off the throttle slightly, maybe even dab the brakes. It's still a 5th gear corner, but yeah, a little bit more control is required to get the car turning in. Now we come up to the left hander, and this is a very quick one as well, and have another blind turning point. First couple of corners very tricky. Not so much the first corner, but the second corner here in particular is very easy to run wide, which we'll show you in a second the reason why it is. Now, what we keep an eye out for is this blue hut here. Now, this blue hut is what you keep an eye out for, and pretty much as it kind of comes into view, that's when I start to turn in. It's a bit of a difficult one really, because it is a blind apex. It's kind of as you get to the top of the crest, that's when you want to turn in. It really is a corner that requires practice to get the feel and to get the rhythm. It is very much a rhythmic track because of those blind corners, and you just kind of repetition, you just end up doing it without even thinking. And it's very difficult to kind of pick out visual markers, but the way I think is that I'm turning in before this blue hut. If you try and get closer to that blue hut and turn in, you're going to run wide of this corner and you're going to run out of track. And the reason this corner is so treacherous and difficult is that the track runs away from you. As we play it round, I'll get back to the throttle inputs very quickly in a second, but you can see here the track runs down, but it doesn't really show it here, but it actually runs away from you. So if you run wide here, the track very quickly, because it runs downhill, falls away from you and turns to the left. It's all working against you. It's all working against the movement of the car. So when you're turning in left, the car wants to move to the right anyway, because that's the lateral shift of the movement of the weight. So all of that is working against you and sending you straight out to the grass on the right hand side. So yeah, if you run wide very quickly, the track runs out and you just end up in the wall. A lot of people will do that here this week. As I said, first couple of laps of the race, you really want to take it careful around here, possibly even shift down into 5th, just to get the front end of the car turning in. But we'll rewind it back just a little bit, because it's important here about the throttle inputs. Now, you will notice we don't use any brake here. It's very quick, and we just have a slight lift. That's all we're doing around here. When the car is up in optimum range, around about half a tank of fuel, nice warm tyres, we can get the car turning in better than we would obviously earlier on, and we use about half throttle, just lifting off. And what we're aiming for is, there is no curb here, so there's nothing to aim for in that regards. So what we want to try and do is get our left wheels as close to kind of the apex of the corner, where the corner comes out is furthest. We want to get as close to the grass as possible, as you can see here. Keeping our foot on the throttle, not releasing entirely. And then we're back on the throttle again once we get downhill. Allowing the car to drift out into the middle a bit, because that's the natural movement of the car, of the weight transfer. And then bring the car back in tight, as close as we can to the grass, again without actually touching it, and then allowing the car to drift into the middle. So a very quick couple of first corners, first sector. We don't actually touch the brake at all, and yeah, you can overtake through both of those corners, but just be very careful of the understeer into obviously the car on your outside. You need to be careful of allowing, or you need to be careful that the guy on the outside is allowing you the room, because it could be very easy for you to understeer and crash into him, basically taking you out of the race. I can guarantee you that will happen a number of times this week. So we're going to run it down into the third corner here, and this corner actually requires a bit more braking. As we said, first couple of corners we haven't even touched the brake, but we definitely do here. And once again, it's a very difficult corner because the track falls away from you. It's an off-cambered corner, and it's very easy to get on the throttle too early, which we're about to show you, where you could just run out of track and have to lift off the throttle, and ultimately you'd lose places. So what we're keeping an eye out for is this board on the left-hand side, and we're not going to be braking on it. We're going to be braking just after it, as you can see. So once that goes out of your view, out of your peripheral vision, that's when you then want to start braking. All the way over to the left-hand side to open up the corner. And then as we bring it round, as you can see, braking, shifting down from 6th to 4th here, guys. And then we're just gonna try and get as close to this apex as possible on this to this curb. We don't want to get on the curb because, as you can see, it's quite raised. If you do get onto it, you will have to let off the throttle because it unsettles the car a bit. So we want to be as tight to it as possible without getting on it. So as you can see, I'm on the curb, I'm on the throttle, I'm just riding the throttle here. I'm waiting for the front end of the car to get round so that I can get on the throttle. And our reference point for getting on the throttle, knowing that we've come around this corner enough that we won't run out of track when we do get our foot down, is these two huts up here on the hillside. Now, once the middle of the car has got round these huts, that's when we get on the throttle, as you can see. So we'll just play that in a bit of slow motion so you can watch the throttle inputs. Keeping it tight to the apex. Probably a little bit hesitant there, as you can see with the throttle input. It's a little bit of time lost, but it's so easy to run out of track here and get on the throttle too early. And then just open up the steering as you're getting onto the throttle, allow the car to drift over to the left-hand side. So I've still got quite a lot of room here on the left-hand side. Where I had that little bit of hesitancy on the throttle, I should have been on full throttle a little bit sooner, and I would have been fine. But it's a corner that you want to survive, guys. If you're a little bit hesitant around there, so be it. It's so easy to get on the throttle too early and just run out of track here, as is the case with the last corner as well. Very treacherous. Once again, will not be surprised if I see people off here or spinning here, because the grass, as we know in iRacing, is like ice. You may hit the wall, you may not. More often than not, you'll just spin, but you'll lose a considerable amount of places if you do. So, of course, we always want to keep it on the black stuff. Now we're coming up to the kink, or the double right-hander, however you want to refer to it. Now, what we're doing here, guys, is just following the track round, going under the bridge. Don't turn in too early. It's very easy to turn in early here, guys. Wait until you've got over the crest so you can see the track come into view. You don't want to be turning in too early, because if you touch this curb here, it really does unsettle the car, and you could spin 50% of the time that I did it. For one, I never gained time, and two, I spun. So yeah, of course, tight to it as possible, but we don't want to be on it. And then we're coming down into the most difficult corner or two corners on the track, and where we're going to see most pile-ups here this week. Now, I would say it is a brave man or woman who wants to overtake here. It's just somewhere that you want to be close up behind them. Of course, it's always difficult to follow in these cars anyway, especially in the braking zone. But you want to be close to them as possible. And now the exit. It's all about the exit, because the run up the hill to the last sector, or the last couple of corners, is a prime overtaking opportunity. It's the longest part of the track in regards to straights, and you will be able to draft someone there. Now, what we're keeping an eye out for, guys, is this blue board on the left hand side, because that is our braking marker. Now just bring it back. We're bringing the car over to the left hand side because it's a right hander and we want to open it as much as we can. But yeah, I'm keeping an eye out for this board on the left hand side, and that is where I'm envisaging that I'm braking just a smidgen before it. And as you can see here, I'm braking, and the reason why this is so treacherous is because you're turning the car. You have to turn the car while you're braking as well. And if you're too snappy with your steering movements, that's when you're going to lose control of the car. And it's very easy when you shift down from third to second here that you're too high in the revs and the engine pulls up and the rear spins. That's really, I think, where most people are going to spin the car is under shifting. Is when they're shifting down. So shifting down from third to second, they just haven't kind of really got control of the car, and the rear is just going to spin on you. So it's as they get to the top of the hill. So as you can see here, we're braking. We want to get to this apex, keep it as close as possible, and it's kind of trail braking as well. As I said, you can see here, I'm not even half using the brake here. It's very minimal brake pressure because we want to allow the car to move round. And then just before you get to the top of the hill, that's when you want to shift down into second. If you shift a little bit later, the car spins. It's all about time in this corner. And then we're trail braking a bit. And this is the difficult part as well, guys. You'll see quite a few people carry too much speed, and it's very easy to do it, to run wide here, run severely wide. And this here isn't actually a runoff, this is dirt. So if you go over this red and white curb, you will lose control of the car. It's very difficult to stop it. You either end up in the wall or spin. It's a nightmare. It's a very difficult corner. So as you can see, as I've got over the crest, I'm getting on the throttle a bit. I even come off the throttle just to allow the car to roll round. And you want to be careful here. So we're now into the second stage of the corner, because we've allowed the car to drift out to the left. I've left myself plenty of room here. I'm not keeping it over to the left hand side because there's just no point. It's very minimal. Running out to the left here and just running onto the dirt. So yes, maybe there's a bit of time to be gained here, but for me, this track is about consistency more so than any others, and just keeping it on track, because as we said, there's a number of corners here. It's so easy to run out wide, and there's no room for error here. There's no runoff. There's very little runoff anywhere. So as you can see, as we've got halfway round, we've got quite a full steering lock. And we're allowing the car to just drift round. We're not on the throttle yet, but then as we get to the apex, now you'll feel it in the car, it dips down, and the track dips down, and when you hit the apex, it really does feel good. But that's when you then want to get full on the throttle. So as you can see, I'm full on the throttle here. Now, I did get, as you'll see, a little bit of a snap of oversteer. So I probably got on the throttle a little bit too early. But this exit is so important, because from here, you're full throttle all the way up into the last corner. And as I said, this is a prime overtaking opportunity, this big, long run up the back straight. So we just wind it back. You're allowing the car to roll through. If you've overshot it a little bit, you need to ride the brake a bit more, do so. But it's important to try and not pull the speed of the car up too much, so that you can allow it to roll through nicely through this corner to get on the throttle. As you can see, a bit of a snap of oversteer here. This little runoff, you can use it, but it is very bobbly when you go onto it. So I would not use this. I would not plan to use this at any point. It's literally last case scenario if you run out of track. But a bit of a snap of oversteer there, and then it's full throttle all the way up to the next corner. It's so important to nail that exit. Probably lost a little bit of time with the oversteer, so it wasn't the prime optimum exit, but it was good enough. And then we come up to a very fast right-hander. Now, what we keep an eye out for here, you can see where the track on the left-hand side starts to come in round to the right. That's when we then want to start turning in, as you can see. Don't need to be tight to that apex at all, so don't worry about that. We're hugging the middle of the track, and as we allow it to come round, this is the apex that you do want to be close to. Now, this is where this setup kind of is let down by obviously the lack of front end. In the open setups, you'll be able to carry so much more speed through here, but this is why we have to lift off the throttle quite a bit, as you can see, just to allow the car to turn in. Because what we want to do is keep it tight to the right hand side, and then we've got a very tight left hander where we require some brake, and then we've got another tight right hander. So it's all about optimizing the angle of entry into both of those corners. If I'd kept my foot full throttle through here, while the entry was good, the car would have drifted out on the second part of this apex, and it just would have compromised the last couple of corners. So as you can see, we're keeping it tight, and as you come to the end of this curb, as you just straighten up the wheel, that's when you're on the brake. So on the brake, down into fourth gear. Once again, a little bit of trail braking here to get the front end of the car turning in, keeping it tight to the apex, back on the throttle, so that we can then quickly get over to the left hand side to open up this right hander. As I said, it's very easy to go wide back here, so that then you've then compromised your entry round here and run wide, and you just run wide through all these three corners and lose so much time, and you leave yourself a bit of a sitting duck, especially down to the first corner. So as we get down, and then as you can see very quickly, just rewind that back, pretty much as we get the car over to the left hand side here, or pointing to the left, we're back onto the brake, shifting down into third, and then we want to get on the throttle before we get to this apex, so that we can power out of the corner. Now, as I said before, as in many corners around here, full tank of fuel, cold tyres, first couple of laps in the race, you won't be able to get on the throttle as early as this, because you just won't have the grip and the turning of the car. But then nice and easy, keeping it as tight as we can, straighten up the steering, use a little bit of the runoff, and there we go, guys, across the finish line. And that there is a lap around Canadian Tire Motorsport Park. A very short, pesky track that is going to throw up some interesting racing. Never been around here before, so yeah, as always, hopefully this track guide has made you more consistent, it's made you faster, but yeah, it's keeping it on the tarmac is going to be the key here, guys, especially around at a full race length. If you do that, especially around this track, I know that's the case in any F3 race at any track, but this one in particular, if you can keep it on the black stuff, you're going to have a good finish and you're going to have a good race. So yeah, interested to see how the week unfolds, but hope you guys enjoyed that. Remember to hit that like and subscribe button, turn those notifications on, and I'll see you for the next one.